Welcome to the One True Church. I'm Hugh Whitmore. This is lesson 1 on the entire Truth of the Bible series. In this lesson, I'll show you how God creates and then loses his kingdom. If you follow this series of lessons, you'll understand God and Jesus, you'll know your part in God's plan of eternal salvation, and by your efforts, you'll bring Jesus back to end all suffering on the earth. The Bible offers a story from beginning to end. So it's helpful to think about the Bible like a novel. The main theme of the novel is that God created a perfect spiritual kingdom that was stolen by Satan right after the beginning of the story. God then spends the rest of the story trying to earn back his stolen kingdom. No matter where you are in the Bible, keep this main theme in mind to understand what God is attempting to do with your help. The theft of God's kingdom is described in the differences between what are often called the two creation stories at the beginning of Genesis, in Genesis 1 through 3. But actually, the first story is creation as we understand it, and the second story is the theft and partial destruction of that creation. Please read these two stories so you can become one of the very few people on earth who understands God and his plan for the salvation of the entire world. These two stories introduce a very important concept in the Bible, and that is the 3 ages of time that exist and will exist in God's kingdom. The first age of time is shown to us in Genesis 1:1 through 2:3 in the first creation story, which actually is the only creation story. This is the story most people are familiar with, where God says things like, "Let there be light," in Genesis 1:3, and "Let the earth bring forth grass," in Genesis 1:11. In other words, God is speaking things into existence using only the great power of his Spirit. In this creation story, God is the only actor in his creation. Adam and Eve and Satan are not present. God has no opposition to anything he's doing with his powerful Spirit. The physical creation is made first, and man is made last in Genesis 1:27, because God does not necessarily need man, but he makes us out of love and out of his desire to relate with us. The key to notice is that God is fully glorified in the first creation story. Glory is the word most used to describe God's power throughout the Bible. God's glory is the main concept you must understand if you want to understand what God needs of you. You know, the Bible is an amazing book in how it often tells things to us by numbers. The full glorification of God is shown in Genesis by the use of God's most important number, which is 7. 7 is used 3 times in one sentence at the end of the first creation story in Genesis 2 and 3. And it reads like this: "And on the 7th day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all of his work which he had done. Then God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made." You see that the writer repeats to get that 7 in there 3 times. This is God speaking directly to us by his numbers. These 3 sevens indicate the full glory, spiritual power, and sovereignty of God in this first creation story, which is the first age of time. Now, what is often called the second creation story, from Genesis 2:4 through 3:24, actually is a story of the theft and partial destruction of the spiritual kingdom God created in Genesis 1. This story also represents the second age of time we're in now, which is the age of sin. In the second story, God is shown as less powerful than in the first story. And he's no longer just speaking things into existence with his Spirit. This reduction in power is because Satan invented sin, as depicted by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that's in the Garden of Eden. There is no evidence that God put that tree there. And why would he? As 1 John 4:16 says, God is love. Sin is a force that steals glory from God. So in this age of sin, God is not as powerful as he was in the first age. Still, God possesses all of his power. He just can't use it all in this age because that power is being stolen. In this second story, God is shown being knocked down in power metaphorically because he's now not just speaking things into existence. He's using physical labor to create things, such as forming man from the dust of the ground in Genesis 2:7, planting a garden in Genesis 2:8, and having Adam name the animals in Genesis 2:19. Also, there are new actors in the story. No other actors but God in the first story. Satan, Adam, and Eve are present and acting against God's interests, and God can't do anything about it. Satan has a level of power and glory that God can't control. Adam and Eve are so in love with sin that they forget God exists and forget his love and choose to follow Satan. By this love of sin and our continuing love for sin today, Satan comes into control of God's entire kingdom. Satan confirms this theft in Luke 4:5 and 6. Then the devil, taking him up on a high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said to him, all this authority I will give you, and their glory, for it has been delivered to me, and I give it to whomever I wish. You see that Satan receives the glory that he steals, and he steals it by the power of sin. This is what keeps Satan in power here and diminishes God's power. This is what defines the second age of time that we live in right now. But we can do something about it. The third and final age of time will exist when we know the full truth of the Bible and follow the instructions of the book of Revelation and fully glorify God again, just as he was in the first age. And Revelation shows this happening in an amazing numerical and spiritual confirmation that shows God is speaking directly to our hearts through this prophecy. I mentioned the 3 sevens in Genesis that prove God was fully glorified in Genesis, in the first age of time. And God speaks to us through these same 3 sevens again in the book of Revelation, showing that we in the church have been given the amazing task of glorifying God, our loving Father, and bringing him back to full stature and power and sovereignty. Revelation 21:9 says, Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls filled with the 7 last plagues came to me and talked with me, saying, Come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. These 3 sevens are shown in Revelation, happening just after God has been returned to his full glory, just as he was in the beginning. This is why God says in Revelation 21:6, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. Alpha and Omega are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet in which the New Testament was written. And of course, first and last, these things go together. God knows he was fully sovereign, fully glorified in the first age, and will again, by our help, be fully sovereign and fully glorified in the last age. It's an amazing thing. God's referring to these 3 ages of time through this number system, giving us this metaphor. He's talking about redemption from the age of sin and the restoration of the kingdom, all brought about by us, his obedient church. It's amazing. For this work, God promises us an eternal reward in Revelation 21:4. God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for all of the former things have passed away. That's our duty, to make that happen. This is what we live for as believers in the one true God, our loving Father, and his Messiah, Jesus. We are to follow the teachings he gave us through Jesus, which include the Gospels and the Ten Commandments. And by our obedient works and abstinence from sin, God will become fully glorified. He'll send Jesus for us. We'll enter the third and final age of time, and we will live all together in eternity forever. Thank you for watching the first lesson in learning all the truth of the Bible. In lesson 2, we'll discuss what glory is, how to glorify God so that he may overcome sin and Satan.